Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant John Solleder. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, it is beyond a privilege to have on the Leaving Nothing to Chance podcast today a guy that, when I say icon, I don't use that word freely in our industry. Icon, legend, leader, legitimate genius. I've worked with him for a short time, and I see the genius in this guy constantly. Author of 14 books. He's been a top-ranked distributor in several companies over the years. Randy Gage, welcome to the show. I don't know how many other accolades I can give, my friend, but just thank you for being here. Thank you for being you, and thank you for your leadership now for over 4 decades in our great industry.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It'd be great to just hang out and chop it up.
Well, I don't even know where to start, but let's start at the beginning. A young Randy Gage, right? 15 years old. I know you had an issue. I know that issue changed your life for the better. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was a teenage alcoholic, teenage drug addict. So at 15, I was making slightly more poor choices than good ones. And I ended up in jail for armed robbery and burglary. So that was a real wake-up call.
And that changed your life. And somebody came into your life that believed in you. And I've heard you tell this story, but only you can tell this story. Somebody came and they said, "You're better than this." Tell us about that.
So I have my best buddy in school, David. He's dating a girl named Joy. Joy's father is a teacher. His name is Baxter. And Joy tells her father, "You got to help Randy Gage. You know, it's David's best friend. He's in jail. He needs your help. Somebody's got to save him." And one day I hear jingling and I look up and the cell door opens and they let in this blonde guy who I've never seen. And it's Baxter. His name's Baxter Richardson. And he tells me, "You don't belong in here. You're capable of great things." And I think, oh, who is this clown? Does he have any idea who he's talking to? And basically I tell him that. And he says, no, I'm not buying that. I've talked to your teachers. You know, I did my homework before I came in here. They tell me your reading comprehension is higher than college level. You skip school for 3 weeks, 4 weeks straight. They don't see you. You show up on a test and you ace the test. You really don't belong in here. You could do great things. And I'd already been in there probably a month, just staring at the cell walls and the ceiling all day, every day, and rethinking my choices in life. And John, I was so desperate to believe what he said that I believed it. And because I believed it, it was true. Just like if I wouldn't have believed it, it would have been a lie. I really believe this. There are just some things in life that when you believe them, they become true. And this is particularly true in the area of self-esteem, self-awareness, belief in your capacity to do things, in the expectations we set for ourselves. As you know, as many years as you've been in the profession, the expectations that we create for ourselves and that sometimes other people create for us can become the reality. And that was the case for me.
So I'm going to guess somewhere in those next few years that a young Randy Gage, searcher of information, as I know you are now, and I'm sure you were then as a young guy, somebody probably put a book in your hands, or maybe you tripped across it at the library, or maybe your mom gave it to you, or who knows how you got it. But there had to be a book that you probably read, that light bulb moment came on and you said, somebody believes in me. and now I have a little bit of direction. Do you remember what that book was?
I could put a couple up, that possibilities. And the fascinating thing, I think the basement to that question is, I never got a book like that until I became involved in network marketing, because I didn't know those kind of books existed. I was a voracious reader as a kid. That's what I believe saved my life. The fact that I was a voracious reader, I had that curiosity. And so I would read, Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and Robert Ludlum novels and espionage thrillers, but that's the only kind of books I knew. And it was only when I got in network marketing that people were talking about As a Man Thinketh and the magic of thinking big and Think and Grow Rich. And they talked about these books with reverence. And so the two that popped to the top of my mind when you asked that question would be As a Man Thinketh and the magic, Think and Grow Rich. Because Think and Grow Rich, that was such a crazy idea for me, the idea of being rich, and that somebody was suggesting that I could be rich. Because my mother was a single mom, raised 3 kids by herself, literally knocking on doors, selling Avon. And you could have traced my family back to the Mayflower. There was nobody who ever had money in my family. It was poverty after poverty after poverty. And so Baxter had kind of convinced me that I was capable of great things. And then when I got involved in network marketing, I bought into the dream and the vision, but I wasn't across the line to like that I would actually become rich. So that book was instrumental for me. I read it every year, at least once, for the next 15 or 20 years. And As a Man Thinketh, which is probably the book that I've gifted the most to people. Unfortunately, it's a really small book. It sells for like $5. I wish it sold for $50,000, because if it did, people would read it with the respect that it deserves, because it's so deep on so many levels about the power of thought. And so those were the, if you say, obviously there's many more, and my list of greatest hits in terms of books would be a mile long, but in say kind of the first one or two that changed my thinking, that would be those two.
So let's say today they knock on your door and they say, Randy, you need a vacation. So we're gonna take you to a deserted, beautiful island. We're gonna give you all the food you can eat, healthy food, all the water you can drink, but you can only bring 3 books with you. Now I'm going to guess that As a Man Thinketh and Think and Grow Rich would be 2 of them, but maybe there's a third out of, if you had to select. And you said you can only bring 3. You can bring your Holy Bible, by the way, as well, obviously, but you can only bring 3 non-religious books.
Actually, I would, number 1 on the list would be Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, because that's the most impactful book that I've read in my life. That's a book that I still read or, reread every year or two. And that was a transformational book for me, because it set me on the pathway of having a philosophy for living, a philosophy for life. How do you live your life? What are the principles you live by? What is your life about? What are you here meant to do? And even though it's a novel, that always shocks people, right? That a novel could have that effect, but that's really what that book is about. She's introducing the philosophy of objectivism in the book. But my takeaway from that was, hey, I need to have a philosophy to guide me, my North Star, a philosophy to live with. So that's the most impactful. I guess the second one I would take would be The Power of Mind by Ernest Holmes. because that's like Think and Grow Rich and As a Man Thinketh and all of those simpler books to the 100th power. It's just at such a high level of that. And probably the third would be a book called Prosperity by Reverend Charles Fillmore, which most people won't know that book or even Reverend. He was the co-founder of the Unity Church and Unity Movement. And that's, another book was probably published in 1950 or something. So it's written in that language of the day. So it's kind of stilted in that sense. But that book, I found it at a very difficult time in my life when things were blowing up for me and falling apart. And that book really put me on the pathway I've been on for maybe the last 30 years of studying the principles of prosperity. So if I got to be stuck with just 3 books, those are probably the 3 I want.
It's amazing doing this show, as long as I've been doing it, is guys like us that love to read. It's like, wow, 3. Like, it's it's like, of all your friends, who do you bring? Oh, I'll bring Bob, and I'll bring Mary, and I'll bring Sue. But books, it's like, well, wait a minute. That's a tougher choice. It's kind of funny. Let's talk about Randy, the author, because you have authored at least 14 books. And I know you're always writing and you're always working. And I know every time we correspond, you're in your office, and it doesn't matter if it's 6 a.m. or 7 p.m. It's like, oh, Randy's working, if I text you. And talk about your books. When was the first one? I know you've had a couple New York Times bestsellers, but, let's talk about your books.
Okay. So the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The first 8 or 9 are terrible. The last 3 or 4 are brilliant. The first one I wrote was, I believe, in 1991, and it was called How to Build a Multi-Level Money Machine, subtitled The Science of Network Marketing. That book had at least 18 or 20 printings. It had 4 or 5 editions. It sold millions of copies. It's been translated into more than 20 languages. And at the time I wrote it, it was brilliant, because nobody had written a book like that in the profession of network marketing. There were a lot of hypey books on, Lambos and palm trees and stacks of cash and rah-rah and hype. And then there were a lot of books secretly designed to recruit people and build a following that you could steal people from other companies. And then there was a lot of books by like consultants and outsiders who saw, wow, there's a really lucrative market here, selling to all these evangelical MLMers. They're rabid readers and they buy products like crazy. And so let me write a book for those people. Nobody in the profession who really had real world field experience, who'd been in the living rooms 10,000 times and been in the hotel rooms and been in all those places and know what it means to have 5 people in a living room with their arms crossed and their legs crossed, hanging onto their wallet for dear life, knowing what it means to have regulatory issues and negative publicity and leaders trying to steal your other leaders and cross-line recruiting. And nobody wrote like, here's a generic step-by-step how to do the business. And so I was extremely proud of that book when I wrote it. And I still would be now, because I think for the time it was, remember, it was 1991. But when people tell me, hey, I just got your book, I'm like, please throw that book away. Get Direct Selling Success, which is the one I wrote, last year. Because that's what happened is, so it was like the end of 2019, the publisher was saying, hey, it's time to go back for another printing. You want to do a new edition of this? And I said, yeah, we definitely need to update it. And So I sat down to do it, and I just kept hitting the wall. Like, no, this write 2,000 words and can it, and rewrite it and can it. And I realized, you know what? I need to just start fresh. There's so much that has changed in our profession. When I wrote this, the internet didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. We didn't even have fax machines, I don't think. Everything, the regulatory environment was different. The reputation of the profession was different. I need to start from scratch and write this book as what I'm doing right now, because I was building in 50 different countries, or I have a team of 200,000 people around the world that I was working with, real world, everyday stuff. So, why am I going to, retrack or retread something from 1991? So that would be the caveat for that, though. So that first book was huge success. My next book was Why You're Dumb, Sick, and Broke, and How to Get Smart, Healthy, and Rich. And that one sold really well, again, translated in, 15, 20 different languages. It's still in print today. People are still buying it today. But I wasn't a very good writer back then. I didn't have an editor. It wasn't really, I look back on it now and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed by that book. But it was the start. It was the start of me being exposed to Ayn Rand and having a philosophy. And that was the first book where I started to sketch out my philosophy for living. Then I wrote a 5-book series on prosperity. And they're all short little, one is 101 Keys of Prosperity. One is 37 Secrets About Prosperity. One is the 7 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity. So they're all, and I wrote literally all 5 of them in 2 weeks. I mean, just went down to Key West, barricaded myself in and said, okay, I write a chapter, I can go to the bathroom. I write another chapter, I can eat lunch. I write another chapter, I can go out on a jet ski. And I locked myself in there and I wrote 5 books in 2 weeks. But they're, they're just kind of this simple stuff of prosperity. I still like them. They're still in print. They still sell well around the world. But again, I don't think I was that good of a writer then. I wrote a book then for direct selling leaders. And then my real breakthrough was in 2012. I wrote a book called Risky is the New Safe. And it was a book not for people in network marketing and not for people who had already drank the Kool-Aid about prosperity. This was a big change for me because I was speaking just to entrepreneurs in general. And I wanted to talk about how people like Mark Cuban and Richard Branson and Oprah Winfrey and really brilliant entrepreneurs, how they think, how they look around the corner and see the future. So I wrote this book in 2012, and I talked about crazy ideas like there was this ride share thing called Uber and Lyft and Sidecar that I was talking about. I was talking about this wacky idea called Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and sequencing the genome, the human genome, designer babies, that you could go in. There will be a time where you go in the office and it'll be like going through McDonald's drive-through and say, okay, for our baby, we want the Maya Angelou poetry gene, and we want the Patrick Holmes quarterback gene, and we want her blue hair and, blue eyes and blonde hair, and, and we're actually at that point already, but they wouldn't let you do that, but that technology is there. I talked about asteroid mining. I predicted Brexit. So all of this stuff of the future, and saying, here's the kind of stuff we have to think about when we, try to figure the future, because the future is always here. A futurist would tell you it's just not evenly distributed yet. So I was looking at what was going on with the blockchain. I was looking at what was going on at DNA. And by the way, I should tell you, you would appreciate this story. That book came about because I'm flying back from Thailand, and I'm in the lounge in SFO airport lounge, and there's a couple there with a puppy, and they take it out of the carrier. I love dogs, so I go over and say, "Hey, can I play with the puppy?" And the lady tells me, "Yes, he's a clone."
Really?
So I laugh. That's a pretty funny joke. And she says, no, that's not a joke. He's a clone. We're bringing him home from South Korea. We cloned him. This puppy is licking my face and jumping all around. It's the most beautiful, adorable puppy like you would find in the pound that you would rescue. So I'm like, there is no way in the world this puppy is cloned. I've heard about Dubai supposedly cloned a camel, and people were looking at this, but that's like Petri dish stuff. That's not real. And then we land in Miami. The couple happens to be on my flight. I don't think they were the couple. They were the people bringing the dog to the couple who had got it, but they were traveling together. So plane lands in Miami, and I get off the plane. I always sit in row 1 or 2, usually row 2, because I like the leg room. And so I'm one of the first people off the plane, and there's all these camera crew waiting. I'm like, well, I had a good seminar, but really, all these people. And of course, they're waiting for this dog to come off the plane because they've all been alerted. And I realized this dog really is cloned. And so that was the impetus for me writing this book. Like, hey, I'm going to have to step up my game. There's just a level of thinking going on here that I'm not even close to accessing. So I wrote the book. It becomes a New York Times bestseller, Publishers Weekly bestseller, USA Today calls it the #1 money book. Wall Street Journal top 10. I mean, hits every top 10 list anywhere. And I'm doing the radio and TV interviews, and these people think I'm crazy. They're like, because I say in the book, they ask questions like, "Do you really believe you're going to be able to take a vacation on the moon?" And I'm like, that's the wrong question. The better question would be, who owns the moon? Like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the US went there first. We put our flag there. Does that mean we own it? Then China went there, or Russia went there, and if they knocked down our flag and they put their flag, does that mean they own it? How are we going to colonize the moon without all of this war and bloodshed that it took on this planet? So maybe that's a better question. They're like, do you really believe that people are going to be able to buy a house on the floor of the ocean and have octopi swimming by and a coral garden in front of them? I'm like, that's the wrong question. The better question would be, what is the price of ocean floor real estate going to do to the price of oceanfront real estate? Those are the questions you should be thinking about. So I remember Joe Vitale, I did his radio show, and he started shrieking. He was like, "How do you think this way? I've never met anyone who thought, how did this happen?" And I was like, Joe, the only thing I can figure out is one day the aliens left me in a basket on my mother's porch, and I've just been trying to fit in ever since then, because that's all I could figure, right? Because I was always different, right? So that was 2012. Then, the next big book breakthrough was called Mad Genius. And again, just kind of updated. Now I'm looking at Elon Musk and people like this. How do you tap into your creative energy? And again, geared to entrepreneurs in the big space. And that had been my focus for 9 years, working with entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders, people like that. And then I'm looking at what's going on in the direct selling, leverage sales, network marketing space, all of the crap, all of the scam books and seminars and workshops from people who they couldn't spell MLM if you spotted them, the M, all these outsiders and all the junk, there'd be like, and I have some of those books sitting over, there'd be like they got a chapter on recruiting and it's 3 pages, right? When I wrote Direct Selling Success, I think the chapter on recruiting is like 5,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
That's longer than those books are. That's just on how to recruit, meet people, right? There was again, like I, mentioned earlier, I was just at that point where I said, hey, I've got to update this. And so I did that. Then I wrote a book just for, again, to kind of I just felt like I got to get back in the space and show people the real truth in the real world, how this business works, instead of these crazy rah-rah hypey books that are all just, hype. So I wrote a book called DEFCON 1, just for leaders who have an organization of at least 10 or 20,000 people. What happens if your CEO is a genius, but he or she is destroying the company? What happens when your top leader takes a deal and goes to another company? What happens if you get regulatory issues? The stuff nobody wants to talk about, the deep, dark, dirty secrets. So I wrote that again, just to get back in the space and bring people back to reality. And then my last book is the one you see on the wall behind me, Radical Rebirth. And that is just nothing to do with direct selling. It's about personal growth and development. And I feel like that book kind of ties together all of my earlier ones. That's the book I couldn't write when I wrote the Dumb, Sick, Broke book, right? I didn't have that critical thinking ability. I didn't have that writing ability. That this now took what I wrote in the Prosperity series, what I wrote in that book, and kind of really on how you recreate yourself. If there's things in your life that you just aren't working for you, there's things about yourself that you hate. There's so many people living lives that they never chose. They're a dentist because their father was a dentist and their grandfather was a dentist and their great-father, or they're in the military because 7 generations of their family has served in the military since the Civil War. But they never really thought, what is it that I'm here for? What is it do I want to do? And so that book's a deep dive into mind viruses and subliminal programming and how we get manipulated and how you take your power back.
Amazing. What's so amazing about the way that you think, okay, is I sat in one fairly brief meeting with one of the guys that you mentioned a few minutes ago, Mark Cuban, way back here in Dallas, about now almost 30 years ago. Uh-huh. And the owner of the company that I was working with at the time, we sat with Mark, and Mark played basketball at the YMCA here in Dallas with one of our distributors. So he brought Mark Cuban in. Now, Mark Cuban's not Mark Cuban. He's just Mark Cuban, kid from Pittsburgh. Dad drove a bus, went to Indiana University, or shoot me, it's either Indiana or one of the two, Indiana State, one of them. And ironically, one of my good friends, Arlene Lowy, her brother was his college roommate. Okay, so anyway, non-related story. But anyway, long story short, this was in the early 90s. And the company owner told Mark Cuban that the internet was a fad. And Mark Cuban said, well, then you're really clueless. Now, this guy, the company owner, went on to be very successful in his company. But Cuban folded up his stuff and said, well, that's the end of this meeting. And he left. Never saw him again. A few years later, he's on the cover of Forbes and Fortune and you name it, and it's like, same guy, right? But to your point,
that the first company, the broadcast streaming one, I think he sold, if I remember, He sold it for 4.3 billion.
That's right. And I knew some guys here locally, some guys in our industry actually that had invested a little bit of money in there and did very, very well as a result. And then he bought the Dallas Mavericks because, hey, I'm a basketball fan. Well, every rich guy needs a basketball team. But to your point, I saw with that little bit of a glimpse into how he thought that day that he was a futurist. And that's, that's what you laid out so well in that book all those years ago. And it's all coming true. And, what you're saying about like the ocean floor and the moon, who would even think of that? I wouldn't think of that. It was like, oh, the ocean floor, I guess that belongs to the first guy that gets there, right? Like a pioneer. Well, what if there's another guy behind him with a bow and arrow? So brilliant the way.
The thing is, like I said, when I did the media tour, these people wanted to commit me. They just thought I was insane. And in the book, I predicted Uber, Bitcoin, Brexit, genetic cloning, DNA sequencing. I mean, all of these things, asteroid mining, all of these things that at the time people just thought, well, this is just crazy shit. And now, if you read the book today, you'd be like, what? Yeah. Of course he predicted that. That's all so obvious. I mean, we have all that stuff, but they don't realize, no, in 2012, that was heresy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, Randy, about our industry, because everything we're talking about here kind of dovetails back to the direct selling world, right? And there's a lot of people, and I love the fact that you refer to this as a profession. I love that because this is a profession. The profession of direct selling is every much as bit of a profession as medicine or law or accounting. There's principles, and if you follow them, you'll succeed. And if you don't follow them, you probably won't succeed. So let's stay on that for a minute. Let's just say that one of your neighbors there, they're talking amongst themselves. And let's just say, let me kind of give you a example or a role here. 25-year-old son, 60-year-old dad. And dad was in upper level management with local company there, did pretty well, was starting to look at retirement, prior to what's gone on the last 2 years, was sitting pretty good financially. Son's college educated, good kid, went to school, got good grades, did the hard work, started his career doing whatever. And then all of a sudden, hits the fan. And they never would consider network marketing because they had a formal education, let's say. And they said, well, that's what other people do. That's what, Uber drivers do on the side. That's not, we're not going to do that 2 years ago. But now all of a sudden, the 2 years that have happened. And dad says to the son, and the son says to dad, hey, that Randy guy that lives next door, he's in that network marketing stuff. We don't know what he does or how well he does, but why don't we go knock on his door today? And they do. And you're a nice guy. So you say, hey, guys, come on in. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that stuff. And they say, Randy, why network marketing today from the perspective of, choose either one to start with, the 60-year-old or the 25-year-old? Why today is our industry so much more attractive, perhaps, than it was 2 years ago or any point in these guys' lives prior to knocking on your door this afternoon?
Well, it's not that leverage sales is better today than it was 2 years ago, although I think incrementally probably is. But it's that we are started to see the real truth about the other ways you can make a living. When Toto went to that curtain and pulled it back, and we saw the man behind Oz pulling the levers, and if in 2019. If you were a vice president for Disney running the theme park division, you had one of the best jobs in the world. 6 months later, you had the worst job in the world. In December 23rd of 2019, if you owned Carnival Cruise Lines or, one of those cruise lines that Mickey Arison here in Miami owns, you were one of the wealthiest billionaires on earth, and you had one of the most lucrative businesses in the world. 4 or 5 months later, when every cruise ship in the world was either on dry dock or roaming the seas desperately looking for a port that would let them enter and let the employees get off the ship, all of a sudden that didn't look so good. And likewise, the millions of people who worked at the shopping malls and the restaurants and the retail shops and the employees at the theme parks and the cruise ships and all of those places realized, wow, what I thought was a safe, solid income, a good, reliable job, a steady source of income, I just realized Toto pulled back the curtain and it ain't what I thought it was. So that answers the issue of how it is now versus 2 years from now. What I would tell the 25-year-old and what I would tell the 60-year-old or the 80-year-old or the 30-year-old or the 50-year-old is the model has changed. You know, the whole premise of The Risky is the New Safe book is that, hey, all the rules have changed. So what used to be true is no longer true. The one constant that you see in both my Risky book and the Mad Genius book is I show the fascinating aspect that Uber could only work because it was started by somebody who wasn't in the taxi industry. Because everybody in the taxi industry said, well, that would never work. You need dispatchers. You got to have a guy calling the cars and, putting out the calls, and you can't. And what do you mean build an app? And the app would track where the cars go and which is the closest car to the driver. That would cost millions of dollars. That nobody could do that, right? But Travis Kalanick and those guys said, no, we can do this on a worldwide basis. We can make it scale. Why did Amazon.com, which of course started as the world's biggest bookstore, could only be started by somebody who wasn't in the bookstore business? Because everybody in the bookstore business said, of course you have to have a brick and mortar store. Nobody's going to buy books online. They go to the local store. We have a little cafe. They can get a coffee and read their book, and they're out shopping anyway. Nobody wants to buy books online. But Jeff Bezos said, I think they will. Tony Hsieh, I'm going to sell shoes online. Well, of course, everybody in the world knows you can't sell shoes online because you can't try them on. And what if they don't fit? And because he wasn't in the shoe business, he could say, no, this is just a logistical thing. I'm going to send them in a box. I'm going to have a pre-printed label. And if they don't fit, it's free shipping. They pop it back to me and we send it back with the next size in 24 hours later. And we'll do whatever we have to do to make our customers happy. And they will buy all their shoes from us for the rest of forever. Right? In all the Airbnb, that Airbnb is not an extended stay company. Airbnb is the world's biggest hotel chain. It's just nobody in the hotel business was smart enough to figure that out because they have their mental models. So what I'd tell all those people looking at our profession today is you got to change your mental model, because the model of the corporate world is broken. The model of trading hours for money is broken. The model of, okay, let's go to college, let's take $80,000 worth of college loans and then get out and go into the workforce is broken. In the old model, you would say, okay, the secret is having more money. If I'm lucky enough to get born to a multimillionaire parents and they have enough money to stake me to start a company, I'll be successful. Money versus no money. That's an old model paradigm. Education. Okay, if I go to school, get an education, get a diploma, take on all that debt, and I go out in the corporate world, I will be a very attractive candidate and somebody's going to hire me and give me a lucrative, rewarding career. Well, that was true in the 80s and maybe the 90s, maybe, but it's not true today. The experience, right? That, okay, if you have enough experience, and I would say throw all those models away, whether it's money, whether it's experience, whether it's education. In the new model, the difference between poverty and wealth is going to be leverage versus not leveraged. If you study the greatest entrepreneurs in the world, which is, of course, what I've been doing since 2011, when I started writing the Risky book, Elon and Cuban and Branson and Oprah and, all those people, and go back to Think and Grow Rich and Firestone and Carnegie and Ford and, Edison and all of those people. How is wealth created? They all learned how to unleash the power of leverage. Now, if you're J.K. Rowling and you can write the Harry Potter series, you know what? You can become the wealthiest woman in Great Britain. But if you can't write the Harry Potter series, then you got an issue. If you're Lady Gaga or Bruno Mars and you can create a song that gets downloaded 5 billion times, you can become wealthy because you're going to practice leverage. But if you don't have the artistic gift of Lady Gaga or Bruno Mars or Ed Sheeran or Ariana Grande or whoever, then what are you going to do? And the answer is, that's why I call it leverage sales. I don't even call it network marketing, direct selling, MLM, any of that stuff anymore. I believe what we really have, the sexy part of what we have to offer, is leveraged sales. Because again, and people say, well, I don't like to sell. Okay, great. But if you could leverage sales, right? Tell me you don't sell. If you're a parent and you're trying to get your kid to eat broccoli, you become the best salesperson in the world, okay? If you're an alcoholic and you're trying to hide your disease from all your friends, you become the most brilliant salesperson in the world. If you want somebody to marry you, you become a great salesperson, right? We all know how to sell inherently. We just don't want to go around with the briefcase knocking on doors of strangers and, selling Fuller Brush door to door. At least most of us, the Fuller Brush people, maybe they love that. I don't know. Right? But what we have is leverage sales. So we say, hey, if you conversationally market these products to your friends, neighbors, and colleagues, relatives, and you put the concept of leverage to work, now you escape trading hours for money. And that's the thing that holds everybody back. You're always going to hit the ceiling because there's not enough hours. There's no amount of hours any human being could ever work in a regular job to equal $4.3 billion that Mark Cuban cashed out with when he sold his company. There's no amount of hours you can work in any job that will get you the wealth of what Elon Musk has right now, or Bezos has right now, or Oprah has right now. Why? Because they practice leverage. And I believe leverage sales gives the average, everyday, ordinary person, whether it's a 25-year-old kid or his 60-year-old father, the chance to practice leverage just like Oprah and Bezos and Branson and Cuban and Bill Gates and all those other people.
Wow, great. I love that. I as you know, I always take notes when you talk. Leverage sales, that's words have power,
Words have power.
Perfect example. I did a podcast with my sister, who a few weeks ago, on communication, and she spends a lot of time in Japan. And I said, the Japanese, to your point, are great marketers. How do you take cold, raw, dead fish, wrap it in rice, and sell it as that? You don't.
Right.
But you come up with sushi and you sell it in 100 countries at a premium.
Right.
Marketing, words have such power. So let me ask you this, Randy. You've been so successful as a distributor on top of being an author. What's the best way to get somebody off to that flying start? And let me kind of give you a little framework on that. I remember early on in my career, 1983, going to my first couple of meetings. And I remember they had a video of this little girl in California who had been with the company that I had joined. And her very first paycheck was 98 cents. And 98 cents, I don't know about you, but even in 1983, I probably wouldn't even bother going to the bank for 98 cents. But this girl, she cashed a check. She became an icon with that company, still is, 40 years later. But I remember that story. And she made a tremendous point. And the point was, when I cashed the check, it proved that the company was real because they actually paid me and they actually had a bank account. And in her thinking, that was good enough to go build a business. And she has, and she continues to this day. To that point, getting that person that confidence, whether that first check is 98 cents, $98 or $9,800, how do you get them there in that fast, efficient way where their belief grows not only in the company, but also in themselves?
Yeah. So I'll give you an abstract answer and I'll give you a specific tool answer. Abstract answer is you will make or break your new distributors in the first 2 weeks. And that first 48 hours is critical. If you can get them into action in that first 48 hours, it dissipates their fear. If you do not get them into action within 48 hours, you have an 80% chance that they're going to drop out because the procrastination will kick in. And what if I call this person? What if they say no? You've got to get them with the philosophy you've got to create, and the actual practice you've got to create is people study, do, and teach simultaneously. So they need to do that for all in their first 2 weeks, because inherently, just default setting, knee-jerk reaction is they don't want to do that. They're like, okay, I need to study this for 2 weeks or 2 years or 20 years. And then I can do it for 2 years and then I can teach it. And those are the people that never get started because they never get any traction because they don't have any customers and they don't have any distributors because they're studying. So they're reading all my books and they're watching all the videos online and they're scrolling the back office and they're watching videos on YouTube and they're becoming the preeminent expert in theories of how to do something if you ever get started. Whereas if you get them, they get a hot list of candidates and you say, hey, I want you to schedule a grand opening for your business. I want you to call the 10 people that love you the most. And I want you to try to get them as customers. They will get some customers right away. If you get their first presentation scheduled within 48 hours, 3 days, 4 days, and you give them tools that help them invite in a compelling manner and get people in front of a presentation, nobody quits when they have distributors and customers under them who are active and their products are free, right? That, in other words, we have to get them to a tipping point and ideally we want to get them to a tipping point where their products are covered, their self-development costs are covered, and their major events are covered. So, get them to an income as quickly as you can where when you say, okay, we have the Go Platinum weekend coming up at the end of December, and you need to be there. They can't say, oh, I don't have money for the ticket, because the ticket is $195 and they're making $311 in their business in a month. So you can say, no, don't be trying to live out of your business after you've been in it for 3 days or 3 months. Everything you make in the first 2 years, you should be reinvesting back in the business. That's why I want you to keep your job or your other business and start this part-time with us for your leverage sales business. So you got to get them to that tipping point where then they're not going to, backslide back. So that first 2 weeks is important. And then I will say the tool, I wrote a book. This is another one of the books that I'm proud of that's still relevant, sexy, and working today, called Making the First Circle Work. And of course, the first circle is the one we drew at Amway, and we wrote you in the circle, right? So The book is called Making Your First Circle Work, Making the First Circle Work. And I got to tell you, there are legions of top leaders and companies that give that the first thing they sponsor somebody into the business. I have companies who include it in the distributor kit, and top leaders who give it to every single person they sponsor. I introduced it at the Art Jonak's Mastermind event, whatever year the book came out. And the entire first printing, 20,000 books, sold out in an hour because the people in that room, I had done a presentation on the book, which is called Turning Hope into Belief. And that's what the steps in the book are. How do we turn hope gets people into the business? Belief is what keeps them in the business. So I went through this whole presentation, and then I said, oh, and by the way, so I wrote this book, whatever. And there were people from the Philippines who said, okay, I need 5,000 that I can take on the plane back with me. I need 1,000 I can take back to the UK. I need 500 I can send to my team in Oklahoma. So literally, we didn't know it's a new book, so the publisher started with 20,000 copies and they were gone in an hour.
Wow.
So that's a tool that speaks exactly to that issue that you raised, which is how do we get that into action, and how do we get them from hope to belief as quickly as possible?
Because once they believe, they become a different animal, that's for sure. So let me ask.
Then they're not going to drop out, because now they're not hoping they're going to get the big bonus check, or hoping they're going to qualify for that free car, or hoping they're going to win that cruise in the Caribbean. They know that that's going to happen.
So let me ask you this, Randy. The discipline of a distributor has changed over the many years that you and I have been doing this. I mean, cumulatively, we're over 80 years. Thank God we're not that old. we started young. We started in grade school. But when I look at the discipline, I think it's tougher. I'd love your opinion on this. I think it's tougher today in certain respects for a distributor to be disciplined. And here's what I mean by that. When we started, we didn't even have cell phones, right? We had landlines. The fax machine came out, I don't know, probably late 80s, I guess. I remember when I got it, it was amazing. I was like, how did I ever live without this thing? I remember I got my first fax from a guy in Montreal. I ran an ad in the newspaper in Montreal. I was living in New York at the time. And I got the guys that he was interested, and he became one of my top distributors. And I was like, how have I ever built a business without a fax machine, right? And then, all the other things that have materialized. And now we have all these crazy technologies, including, what we're doing this interview on Zoom, right? Which didn't exist 5 years ago. And all that's a great thing, but it's also a very distracting thing. So your advice to somebody that's in our business that is struggling with managing where they start their day in terms of, be it self-development, be it within their own respective company, their training system that's very specific to their company and opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. How does that person today eliminate all that noise and focus at the task at hand, which is building their business for them and their families? What's the best way to do that today?
Yeah, I believe in starting your day with personal growth, self-development time. Whether it's reading one of the books like we talked about, listening to a positive podcast like this, something that grows your mind, body, and soul. And that creates your mindset. Like, I do 30 minutes a day of self-development. I don't answer the phone. I don't answer the door. I don't leave the house until I've done my self-development, because I'm not going to leave the house until I have my consciousness vibrating up here. And so when I go out in the world, I'm going to attract people and circumstance who are also vibrating at that level of consciousness. Believe me, when you call a candidate at 7:15 on Tuesday night and you say, hey, I've got a 15-minute video about how to create residual income. If I send it to you, Would you watch it and call me right back? Your chance of success, if you did 30 minutes that morning, 12 hours earlier, is 60% greater, even though it's 12 hours later, because you're a different person asking that question at 7:15 because you did 30 minutes of self-development that morning than you are if you're the person who woke up late, you hit the snooze bar 5 times, you jumped in the car, you bought breakfast in the 7-Eleven, eating a burrito at the red light, you rushed into your office, your boss was looking at you cross-eyed because you were 6.5 minutes late again. Your whole day changed, and that changed you. Changed your mindset. It changed the look in your eye, changed the energy in your body. It changed the posture with which you're holding yourself when you're making that call, and the mental posture of who you are when you say, if I send you that video, right? So I really believe that, right? That this self-development, it sets the tone for the whole day. And then what do you do after that? Well, I check all my email. Well, what is email? Email is a to-do list of what everyone else wants you to do. So if you start your day with a to-do list of what everyone else wants you to do, how are you going to accomplish what you want to do? If you get sucked into social media and you're like, well, I'm scrolling through Facebook because I'm prospecting for good candidates. Oh, wait, is that a dog on a surfboard? Oh, wait, is that a cat riding a vacuum cleaner? Oh, wait, is that a goat, playing tennis with, forget about it. It's a black hole's going to suck you down, so you've got to focus on a planner. You got to schedule your time. Okay, you can't, if people tell you, listen, you can build this business in 2 hours a week. You know what? They're lying. You can't build the business in 2 hours a week. Because what if you sponsor somebody and they're actually a good, a player? They need more time from you. You can't support them in 2 hours a week. What if you have 2 people, right? You need at least 10 hours a week, 12 hours a week. I like to say 10 to 15 hours a week is what it takes to do the business to start. So, and the only way that works is if you schedule out that time, because if you don't, it's going to evaporate. If you don't have 90 minutes put in your calendar to call candidates, it's going to evaporate. Something will come up. Mm-hmm. The lint dryer and the filter in the dryer needs to be changed, and you need to straighten out your stereo wires, and you got to soak your comb, and there just will be pressing emergencies that have to be done then. But if you've got it planned out, and then the other thing and I think this is where we all have to have tough love as a sponsor with our people, is that we really work with them and mindfully help them schedule their planner each week for a couple of weeks, especially when they first start, and that it's on rainmaker activities. And, maybe people in other countries, it's kind of a slang term, but we mean knocking over my microphone. Sorry for you guys listening who just had your eardrums shattered. Rainmaker, meaning it brings the rain, meaning it produces sales, right? So rainmaker activities are, we're getting candidates in front of a presentation so they can become a customer or a distributor, or we're following up with people who've been in front of a presentation, or we're servicing current customers. Those are rainmaker activities. But, reading books and scrolling through the internet and dog videos, those are not rainmaker activities. So those are the things that I think if we work with our people on those areas, that's where they're going to really be productive and get results.
Great. So let me ask you this, Randy, in wrapping up, because I could go on for about 3 hours with you, and we could have like 4 interviews in one. But just I know a lot of people seem to listen to these podcasts when they're at the gym or on the way to work, so I don't want to make them too long. But people will see this interview. We're going to put it out the first Tuesday of February is when it's going to come out. And it's for a specific reason I'll explain to you offline here when we're done. But we're doing it in December. We're doing it as 2021 comes to a close. 2022 is going to start. And two questions in one, Randy. You can answer it however you want to, of course. Your dream board philosophy, because it's a philosophy as well as an activity, I believe, is brilliant. So much so that my son, my only son, turns 18 on New Year's Eve. And I had him sit down yesterday. And I said, you know, Fred, you're going to be 18. You're going to be a man legally. You can vote. You can pay tax. Well, you can pay taxes earlier than that, but you can vote. You can pay taxes. You can join the military. For that matter, you can move out if you want to, which, you know, he's not going to. He's still in high school. But I had him sit down and start his dream board. And of course, he started out. First thing was a Lamborghini. Of course, he's got a Lamborghini on. There's a car guy. But he has other things on here because, you know, he's got some other goals in his life. He's got a lot of interests and things. Talk about why, whatever age, whether you're 18, whether you're 60, whether you're 85, and you hear this interview, what happens when that person's mind starts to dream and let itself go, how all of a sudden things start to happen that if they don't do that activity, they're just a thought. How do they actualize that?
Well, that's the deep, deep message in my last book, the Radical Rebirth one, about how we get programmed, our subconscious mind. And we are receiving literally thousands of mind viruses every day, right? And 95% of them are negative. They're mind viruses. And by a mind virus, I mean, it's like a virus you would get in your computer on your hard drive. What the idea, this is called a meme, right? From the science of memetics. Now, when you say meme today, most people think it's like a cute picture on Facebook or Instagram. But the term actually comes from Sir Richard Dawkins in his book, The Selfish Gene. And he was talking about the evolution of man and how we had, for a couple million years, we evolved by DNA, by biology, by why did giraffes get long necks? Well, they reached up to get more leaves that they couldn't reach, and over a period of thousands of years, they developed long necks. You know, why did birds develop eyes, and why did koalas develop ears? Well, you know, we all started as primordials, pond scum, you know, at the Big Bang 13.5 billion years ago, or whatever you believe. Maybe it's the Garden of Eden. Doesn't matter to me what your personal beliefs are, believe them. But we know humans and animals evolve, right? And what Richard was talking about was how we are now evolving more from mind viruses than we are DNA, from the social influences around us. And he suggested the term meme as an alternative to gene. And this was in his book called The Selfish Gene, for somebody who really wants to do the deep dive into this. Brilliant book. So he equates memes with genes. So a meme is a mind virus. So if you have a little child who's 6 years old and they play the Baby Shark TV show, the Baby Shark theme is now in your ear. That's an earworm. That's a mind virus. If you see Just Do It from Nike, that's a mind virus. If you're listening on Daddy Yankee's Shaky, Shaky, Shaky song comes on the radio, that's a mind virus. When Barack Obama said, yes, we can, that's a mind virus, right? Governments, religions, companies, marketers, social media, movements, all these things are creating memes. And now with social media and the internet and podcasts and smartphones, and you're just being programmed thousands of memes a day. And the vast majority of them are along the lines of money is bad, rich people are evil, it's spiritual to be poor, to be successful in business, you have to be a bad parent. to be a successful company, you have to exploit your workers and pillage the environment and steal from shareholders. There's just all this negative, dysfunctional, destructive programming. And it infects your mind, and you have to counter program against that. So the book is, I literally broke your life down into 6 major areas: money and success, work and career, health and wellness, marriage and relationships, God and religion, sex and sexuality, and said, let's look at all the mind viruses in each of these areas. And then how, so obviously the money is bad, rich people are evil. Everybody knows all those bad mind viruses about money. They're still infected by them, but they at least know they exist, right? What about, marriage and relationships? Well, if your mom and dad fought with each other, or they were abusive, or one cheated on the other, your core foundational belief about marriage and relationship, it was decided before you were 10 years old. When you were 8 and you said, Mom, I want that new video game. And she said, we may not be rich. But we may be poor, but we're good people. Or money doesn't grow on trees. You got a core belief about money, right? If you're like the average person in America, your parents are 20 pounds overweight and your grandparents are 40 pounds overweight, and your parents take 6 prescription medicines a day and your grandparents take 12 prescription medicines a day, and they drink 10 cans of diet soda, and they eat nothing but cake and cookies and pasta and manufactured fake substances that we call food. That's your core foundational belief about health and wellness, right? So all of these 6 areas, I believe you're programmed before you're 10 years old. And what I'm doing in the book is saying, hey, you can change that. You can go back and see what that programming is. So go back to your original question about the dream board. What are we doing with the dream board is we're counter programming against all of that negative programming, all of those negative mind viruses. And we know that when your conscious mind, which says, hey, I want to be a millionaire, meets your subconscious mind, which says, don't you know millionaires are evil people? The subconscious mind always, always, always wins. Because the conscious mind is that 5% of the iceberg above the water. The subconscious is the 95%. You all know that, right? But here's practical application of how it works. So when you create a dream board, even when you don't look right at it, when it's just in your peripheral vision, it's programming an impression on your subconscious mind. So the idea of the dream board is put things on there of images, words, pictures, photos, graphs, charts, drawings, doesn't matter. There's no rules. It's just you have to know what that image stands for you, right? So Fred wants a Lambo. He puts a hot yellow Lambo on his board. He knows exactly what that is, but he might have something else that maybe he wants to find the perfect woman to get married to. So he might put a photo of 2 wedding rings, or he might put a photo of a couple holding hands, or as long as it means something to him. And so so you do images of things you want to do, have, and become. Why did my book hit the New York Times bestseller list? I will tell you the real reason is because I cut out the New York Times bestseller list from the newspaper. I whited it out and I put my name there and I put it on my dream board. And that's why it happened. Why did I get my first Viper? I will tell you it's because I had a Viper on my dream board. And so it can be like things you want to do, have, and become. And just don't put it where other people are going to see it, because they're going to ridicule you. They're going to attack you. They're going to question you, right? Because most people, they have those mind viruses and they don't even know it. You want to put it somewhere where you're going to see it every morning and you're going to see it every night before you go to bed. And hopefully you walk by it a couple of times around the day. And every time it's an impression in your subconscious mind. And, I talk about this in a lot of 3 or 4 of my books. And I got to tell you, I get letters and emails and texts from parents who have 8-year-olds doing their dream boards, 9-year-olds doing their dream board, and 85-year-old people doing their first dream board for themselves. And I'm telling you, nothing is more exciting to me than to get messages like those.
Well, I'll tell you, it's inspirational. It's simple to do, but do it. And you've given that message to so many people, and we're passing it along because it's critical. And you mentioned Oprah or Mark Cuban or Richard Branson or any of the contemporary great thinkers, or the ones in the past, or the ones way in the past. We go back to Lincoln or Washington or Aristotle. I mean, you go back as far as you want to go back in time. And I would believe every one of those people accomplished what they did because they saw themselves doing it. You know what I mean? They believed that they could do it, whether they had a dream board or not, who knows, but they had some version of it in their mind, or they never would have accomplished what they accomplished. And I think we have to get people, not just in our type of business, but in general, humanity across the world, all 7 billion of us, starting to think right again. And I think your dream board concept is something that does that. So Randy, in wrapping up, first of all, I want to thank you, my friend. You are amazing. You are a man amongst men in business. And I have to say that to be able to write books and build downlines at the same time, because I've done a little bit of the book writing. I've done it 4 times, and I know how many airplanes and how many, it's halftime at the game. Let me go run, or my kids, when my son was playing a lot of hockey, would be like, okay, it's between periods. Let me go write down, 4 sentences and see if they make any sense after the game. So I can't even imagine how you've done what you've done. But best place for people to contact you, is it still randygage.com? Is that the best place if people want to take a little bit more of a view into the Randy Gage world?
Yeah, that's my Starfleet command site. You'll see my blog is on there. I have a podcast called the Power Prosperity Podcast. You have links to all the platforms there. And I have a newsletter, comes out every Friday, that I call Friday Philosophy. So it's all there, randygage.com. And I'm not on social media. I have hundreds of thousands of followers across platform after platform. And 3 or 4 months ago, I shut them all down because I just said, I don't want to play that game anymore. There's just too much partisan bickering and negative programming. And that's the best decision I made in all of 2021, was I left social media. So if you want to find me, it's randygage.com.
Great. Well, Randy, once again, I want to thank you. I want to wish you best of everything this coming year and in the years to come. You've been an inspiration. You've been a teacher. You've been a mentor to so many people across the industry. It's amazing when your name comes up. There's nobody in the industry doesn't know who Randy Gage is. It's incredible. And continue good work, good health in 2022, my friend.
All right. Thanks, John. Same to you. Happy New Year to everybody listening and watching. Go out and have an amazing 2022.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Solleder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.